Hey everyone, excited to be here. New episode of Fish Innovation. Today we have a special guest, an accomplished author. He has, for the last decade, built so many scaled solutions using data-driven decision making, which is very important in product work, in business, and all around. He talks about SLASOG, which we'll learn more about today, which is an amazing acronym that you will all want to put into your vernacular right after this. I want to bring into the episode Ritavan. Hey, Ritavan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Uh, we had a conversation earlier, and it was really great to getting to know you about your journey, about what has shaped you, what has impacted your life, and what brought you to this awesome book that's launching soon. I'd love for listeners to be able to get a chance to hear about that story as well. Why don't you walk us through it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ritavan. I'm a mathematician. I specialized in machine learning, and I've worked a decade across a whole bunch of legacy industries. Broadly, these are all industries, that are non-software native: banking, energy, insurance, real estate, etc. And my experiences there and the solutions I kind of built and scaled resulted in peer-reviewed publications and invited talks at conferences, have an international patent. And based on these learnings and actually the scars, a lot of things that really hurt, that annoyed me, that I saw happening that just were wrong, kind of led me to kind of put all these ideas together to sort of um, productize everything I kind of gathered over a decade into my book. And the book is called Data Impact. And you mentioned my SLASOG framework. So it's a 6-step framework where the 6 letters or the 6 words in the framework are save, leverage, align, simplify, optimize, and grow. And sort of what I think what has been kind of driving me all through has been, I'd say, two key elements. One is thinking from first principles, problem solving. So, bringing mathematical rigor to empirical problems, to, real world problems. And on the one hand, but very closely kind of intertwined and married with the other element, which is owning the P&L and driving, measurable impact. And these are the two things that kind of, in some way or the other, kept me going, for most of my life. Looking back, it's always easy to look back and connect the dots. And I think these are the two things that I see. And, as far as values are concerned, I did a little workshop to understand myself better. And I think the 3 things that came out are clarity, courage, and impact. And so I was a curious kid growing up, and I went to an alternative school. I was given the playground to really explore my interests and kind of really push my curiosity to the limit. And that led me then to also start thinking what I wanted to do in life. And I was not one of those kids that at 7 knew exactly what they wanted to do. So it was a journey of exploration and also first principles thinkings in many ways, because I started reading biographies. I started understanding how the lives of people that inspired me kind of transpired. And a pattern I saw was, if I studied mathematics just from an academic perspective, it would keep all doors open, because you can go into physics, you can do computer science, you can go into finance, I even found some politicians or policy wonks with a math background. And in theory, I think you can really do anything. And that's kind of I would say that's the mental reason why I picked math. Then there's also an emotional driver, because I think the two things in any kind of strong behavior change or strong drive usually has both of these elements, So something that makes kind of rationally sense, but also something that drives you emotionally. And for me, it was really a teacher when I was 15 who said, yeah, I'm not sure if you're really capable of studying math, and you might want to, pick some other subjects. And I think being not just curious, but also competitive and very much free spirited, I was okay. Let's check this out. Let's see if it's true. And that led me, all the way then to major in math. In my undergrad, I get a full scholarship from a math foundation to study in Paris and then do my master's in math. And so, I have nothing more to say. I think that rests my case.
Yeah, I love that. Math, it's so great. I had a background in math as well. It was a minor in college. And you're right. I think what's so important about it is, I think it's really rules based. So it really helps, especially when thinking about strategy and how you would approach your own business or your own life. It's rules based, so it follows order, it follows a pathway, a process, a system. So I could see with what you're doing today how you could be, whether you were drawn to a math because of that uh, inspiration or emotional connection, or it shaped you to who you are today. Either way, I'm glad it did, because we're able to now have the ability to get inside your mind on how you came up with this. SLASOG, it's great, sounds like a fun word to say all the time. So it's really interesting. I have a lot of folks from around internationally on the show. And so one of the things I know it's a little different for my American audience is that in Europe, one of the things I learned is it's very split up into different areas. Right? So London is very finance specific. I think Germany is maybe engineering, but you did math in Paris, right? But um, you grew up in Germany, right?
Yes, I mean, it's a funny story, but I kind of grew up on the southeast coast in India. But I went to an international school that was multilingual, and so speaking French and from the age of 3. I started English at 6, and at home I ended up speaking French and German, and with my mom in Hindi, and so it was like a whole bunch of languages that I kind of grew up with, which is also very weird, I think, by Indian standards. It's not something that's very common. And I think because I studied math and natural sciences, so physics, chemistry, etc., in French, it was kind of a good logical step to then continue my graduate studies in France. And France is just known globally for its math school. For a century, they have the highest per capita number of field medalists, etc. So I mean, France just had that tradition of mathematics, and so it kind of all added up, and that's how I ended up studying math in Paris. And it was a fun experience because they're not like compared to the US or compared to the UK or other countries. You don't have that, at least, a little more than a decade ago, there weren't that many international students going there. And so France has a very competitive system where, from high school onwards, you start really specializing very deeply. And then you have 2 to 3 years of prep school before you move into the elite research institutes. And I was of course, it's not as if I did not kind of study a lot or kind of, go deep when I was studying math, but I didn't have that prep school background. And so I was kind of parachuted into this super specialized class of, 19 super smart people. And so it was a bloodbath. The first semester and the first year was rough, very rough. But I think that's what kind of, triggered the fighter in me, the free spirit in me, was the maverick in me. It was, okay, we're going to get this done, whatever happens. And I think the confidence then, once you actually are able to do it, something that seemed a priori impossible, and that was something that was very rewarding. And then the second year was much easier, because machine learning by its nature is multidisciplinary. So you need to be able to think, but you also need to be able to code. You also need to be able to acquire domain knowledge about whatever the source of the data is. So we had a whole bunch of electives, with dozens of electives with data from satellites, from animal brain signals to other kind of image data to audio signals to you name it. So I think by its very nature it was kind of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, and it's something that obviously, given my curiosity and my kind of less specialized background, was then very well suited to kind of to grow into.
Data makes the world go around. Everywhere we look, we are able to move forward because of the data. A lot of inventions that have impacted our entire world have come from data. So I think it's amazing that you were able to study math to get to use that data scientist background to then make that impact and see how to make great decisions based on that data. So speaking of data, which we probably said about 7 times now, I'd love to hear more about data impact. Especially, can you walk us through what inspired you to write the book? And then if you could sort of walk us through the book and then talk to us about SLASOG in more detail.
Yeah, for sure. I think just to frame the conversation, I think the ideal audience for this is a business owner, an entrepreneur, an executive or an investor in what I call legacy industries, so non-software native industries or businesses. And it can be, I have a dozen case studies in my book, ranging from companies that are over 100 years old to ones that are a little over a decade old. It need not be a very sort of small bucket. I think there's a whole range of companies for whom this framework should be useful. So it's also, of course, relevant for data professionals. I mean, this is something that I have personally experienced in my peer group with people who are more junior. A lot of people working in, let's say, not big tech. Always had this funny framing with Wall Street and Main Street, and I think now it's big tech and non-big tech because there's just so much of the economy that's just not big tech, and we need to talk about it. We need frameworks for it. We need good content. We need playbooks. You have so much written today about Facebook did this or Google did that, but hey, how's that in any way relevant to your business? And even if Facebook did something, does not mean you can do it, right? I think this is kind of what I also try to do is I do not go into these platitudes and sort of copy paste commonly known stories and stuff. It's really first principles thinking as well as examples that are not like that you probably never come across or are very unlikely to have bumped into, but that are relevant for non-big tech businesses, right? I mean, I think just to kind of give a context to what's going on, if I always sort of said, okay, if Adam Smith were alive today and looking at what's happening, how would he sort of think about it? And if you think about why a business exists, that's something that Peter Drucker very clearly articulated in the 1950s. It's because there is a customer. There is no business. If there is no customer, there is no business. And so by definition, if you're a legacy business, you're not a startup that's starting at zero, you have customers. Or if you're, 5 years or 10 years into business, you have customers. So it's super important to kind of approach and think from the strengths you have. So a lot of startup playbooks are also not relevant for small business owners or others because you're not starting from zero, right? You already have strengths. You have a unique advantage, and you need to think in terms of that. So that's kind of the motivation behind the book. And again, coming back to Adam Smith, he kind of looked around and tried to observe and say, okay, what's going on? Like, because industrialization was just getting started at that point, people are moving away from farms and into factories. And he started thinking, like we need trade. We need specialization, which was the pin factory. So everyone, instead of one person creating a product, a physical industrial product from scratch, you have specialization. And so is, his famous diagram of the pin factory where every step of the pin production process is specialized and done by one person. And I was okay, when I was researching the book, I took a step back and said, why are industrial age businesses, legacy businesses, why are they struggling now? And what is at the root of this? So there are playbooks from startups and big tech, which you can't apply. Obviously, it's not the same context. And so you need to think from first principles. I think that's obvious. But the thing is, how do you, like when you start thinking from first principles, what's going on? And I think one important thing to figure out is what's the value creation mechanism? And what I mean by that is if we go all the way back, to the Stone Age, we were hunter-gatherers. And the value creation in hunting is you do some activity to kind of get your calories and meat in, right? So then how did that happen? Right? If you try to picture hunting, you think it's 24 people running after a big mammal and with a spear and so. And if you actually start looking at data, I mean, of course, you don't have data from the Stone Age, but you have a lot of anthropologists who've gone to like remote tribes around the world and studied them over long periods of time, documented it, collected data, etc. And so if you kind of put all these papers together and try to get a meta view of what's going on, and this is obviously very simplified and kind of very just to give a broad kind of view of what's going on, because it of course varies by geography, it varies by season, etc. But broadly 50 to 60% of all meat, of all calories procured through hunting are via traps, and traps are the first form of automation. So you might think you're going with spears and killing big mammals, and that's only about 20-30% of meat consumption. The rest is from traps. So you have a strong component of automation. In fact, the majority is automation. And if you think of unit economics, you set up a trap, you invest 1 unit of time, and then you can have more than one animal fall into it. You're not constrained. You can go anytime and check on it. It's small repair work. And so You already have automation emerging as a big value creation driver. And then you move on from hunting, you move on to farming. And then you realize, okay, farming is a very different game. And the base layer of automation in farming, and it's something that Daniel Priestley's spoken about, is soil. Soil is automation.
Yeah.
In farming, we as humans are we're putting the seed in. Yes, we're kind of watering and taking care of it, etc. And then we're kind of harvesting it at the end. But the magic is happening between the planting and the harvesting. And the majority of work there is nature. You cannot will a seed to grow into a crop. And so again, that's automation, except that
You're absolutely right. It's so interesting because a lot of folks maybe might not know specifics of farming. Farmers will rotate crops because the soil will either take nutrients or give nutrients depending on the crop you're growing. And
yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying there is no skill or knowledge or experience to farming. I just want to put that out there because that's something also very often it's not about trivializing it. Just like setting up a trap, that's not something you and me would know how to do well, but a skilled hunter would know, right? So it does not mean that there is no expertise required, right? What I'm trying to get at is broadly that the unit economics and the driver of value creation has always some strong form of automation. And so you have traps in hunting, you have land in agriculture, and it's very different. What I'm trying to get at also is if you now took the most skilled hunter and asked them to start farming, if they brought their hunting experience and mindset, they would probably struggle to farm because it's a very different way of kind of creating value, right?
The same would be leverage the automation, right? They have to know
exactly
how to leverage.
So the automation is different, and you need to know how to leverage the new form of automation. The same from farming to the industrial age, right? Now you take a big farmer and you ask them to set up factories, etc. It's a very different game. Now suddenly the amount of land you have does not matter because land is not the unit of leverage of value creation, right? It's factories, it's machinery, it's unit component labor, etc. And then you go from the industrial age to the digital age, right? And I think the big change there is replication costs in the industrial age are constant. So once you set up your factory, you create, one T-shirt, you want to create the next one, your costs are constant, your unit costs remain the same. Personalization costs are constant. So if I've set myself up, to make one kind of T-shirt, I decide to do a different kind of textile, it's not something I can do for free. It's going to cost me something. If you go from the industrial paradigm, value creation paradigm to the digital value creation paradigm, replication costs start going to zero. So now I can write software once, but anyone can use it. I can replicate it as much as possible. Like I don't have costs anymore. I don't have big costs associated anymore with that. Personalization costs still existing, somewhat constant. If I have to customize something for you, my unit costs are still there, not able to drive them away. But then you move into the data-driven digital paradigm, and now, of course, replication costs are zero because each paradigm kind of builds in some way on the other, or like these two at least build on top of each other. And now my replication costs are essentially zero, but my personalization costs are moving to zero. And so the way you think about value creation is the unit of value, and the way you approach value creation is fundamentally different. So you cannot take a playbook from a big tech digital native company and apply it to your industrial or non-software native business. Similarly, if you were to try to take a startup playbook and apply it, it wouldn't really make sense either because you already have customers, you have a brand, you have legacy, like you're already starting at a different playing field. So it doesn't make sense to start to kind of apply a playbook from 0 to 1. So that brings me now to the first kind of letter in my 6-step framework in SLASOG. The first one is save. And save what and save why. And I always joke, if you speak to someone in the data space, they will all tell you, oh, you need to invest, you need to buy this, you need to buy that SaaS solution, you need to do this consulting project, you need to do a whole bunch of things. And a little provocatively, what I say is let's take a step back and let's start saving, because it's a lot of nonsense that you're probably doing that does not make sense. And I use two sort of very widely occurring examples that are just wasteful, overall approaches that are just wasteful. One of them is what you could call, spray and pray, which is, so let's define a narrow use case, right? So let's say we have this is our business, and let's just cut out a small slice, and then we define that as a use case. We kind of budget it, and then we build something and see what the value is. And then you do it, across. So you cut little boxes. If your business is a piece of paper, you cut these tiny little boxes, try to do something, and then you say, And most of the time, I mean, just logically, it's not going to bring anything, because the way you have selected or defined your use case is not aligned with the data-driven value creation paradigm. It might be aligned with the industrial paradigm, value creation paradigm, right? Because if you look at factory automation and the way efficiency is brought about in manufacturing or in physical production or whatever, right, or in any kind of physical business, that paradigm operates on a divide and conquer, cut stuff up, etc. It's very Newtonian way. And if you go back to physics or science in general, I think you have these kind of in understanding of nature, and so it's a bit like going from Newtonian physics to quantum mechanics or to Einstein's theory of relativity. There is no step-by-step transition there. It's just a different way of seeing the world. And you cannot say I want to develop GPS, but I will stay Newtonian, because I think people are like, okay, Einstein's theory is cool, but is it really useful? Well, I think there's a strong argument to be made that you can't really, like, you cannot have GPS, cannot be accurate if you stay Newtonian. So it is useful. Similarly for quantum mechanics, right? Modern mobile phones and a lot of other technology that we use day to day would just be impossible if you had a Newtonian worldview. And so similarly, if you have an industrial age, value creation paradigm worldview, and you try to play the data-driven digital game with that, it's not going to work. So you cannot just cut up stuff and, you cannot optimize your business in the data-driven digital age. You would do it in the industrial age. So that's why, the spray and pray stuff is just nonsense. Don't do that. Save yourself money. We can use that as seed capital for other stuff later on. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I also have a funny little anecdote there. What I've seen very often is, people say, yeah, we want to, wisdom of the crowds, and we're going to ask all our employees and do a little survey and kind of see what people think, and they'll come up with use cases because they're the ones, on the front lines. They know what's happening. And if you think about it, like mathematically, the model or construct for this is Condorcet's jury theorem, which is sort of this wisdom of crowd ideas. If you have enough people, then their ideas coming together will lead to a better outcome than any one person making a decision. But this only works under certain circumstances, right? That's why it's a jury, for example. Like there is a binary decision. Is the person guilty or not guilty? If you have a nuanced decision, you cannot, like, wisdom of crowds doesn't work for nuanced decision.
Agreed. Yeah. I've come across a lot of early stage founders, and even legacy business owners will do that. They'll get crowdsource or find, hey, I'm going to have my roadmap. Let me listen, tell me what I need to build. And people are great, except you have to look underneath the surface to understand where the connectivity come, because people are just going to relate to what's they're known or similar to them. So they might have seen the feature somewhere else and they've used it. They're going to ask for it because if it's not there, they think it's supposed to be there. But from the business owner, it might not resonate with your strategy. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so there are multiple things. I mean, one, the context is different, right? If you go back to Condorcet's jury theorem and the mathematical kind of foundation to explain wisdom of crowds, the jury is sitting through the entire judgment. So they have the same context, right? They're listening to the input they're getting is the exact same during the trial. Right? So that's super important. And now suddenly you say, okay, what does my field salesperson know about my accounting person? Like their context, their day-to-day context is completely different. Like, how can you expect asking them and aggregating their perspectives to in any way create value? Because there is zero, these are completely different things. And so the assumption, like understanding the assumptions behind why wisdom of crowd works, right, behind why Condorcet's jury theorem works, is super important. Because if the assumptions aren't true, then the outcome, obviously, like the logical mathematical outcome will also not be true. And I completely agree with you. I think these are scars from my decade of operating. I have seen this so many times, and it's shocking how commonly this happens, and no one's asking that question, because you don't want to be the guy that questions, your colleagues, or you don't want to be the guy that comes in and says, we will lock ourselves in our ivory tower and come to a conclusion. But if you think about it, Adam Smith, going back to foundational ideas, whether it's in economics and science, etc. I mean, Galileo didn't crowdsource his kind of heliocentric theory of the world. He didn't go around asking in his village, does the earth turn, does the sun turn around the earth, or the other way around? He thought it through, he calculated it, he thought from first principles. The same with Adam Smith. He didn't go around asking farmers in the UK, how do we set up our factory? And no, we have to think through from first principles, because if you go and ask an artisan that is making a pin end to end, that's their lived reality, that's their context. They cannot take a step back out of, they don't have any other context to come up with something else. And so that intellectual rigor of being able to take a step back, looking at the big picture, That's your job as a business owner. That's your job as an executive. That's your job as an investor, right? And that's also your job as a data professional, because if you want to create value in the data-driven digital paradigm, you need to understand that value creation in your domain, in your profession is different from value creation in the legacy business you operate in, right? And if you don't build that bridge, if you're not able to bring these two worlds together, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to waste your time. You might take a good, and that's what I also joke is, right now there's just so much money floating around and you can still live a comfortable life doing this. But at some point, just the purpose will disappear. But also, at some point, someone's going to figure this out and stop doing stupid things. And so save. I don't do that. And the other common thing is, multi-year Soviet-style digital transformation initiatives. For the next 5 years, we're going to swap our CRM system, our ERP system, we're just going to change all our systems. We're going to give out a lot of money. We will move to the cloud. We will stop the on-prem. We'll do this and that. Here is how is that creating value? Does your customer really care what system you're using in the background? How is it making their life better? And so this is kind of very supply side thinking, which is typical in the industrial value creation paradigm, because if you want to create more value, you need to build another factory, and setting up a new factory is capital intensive. It's upfront, big investments, big long-term plans. So it makes a lot of sense in the industrial value creation paradigm, except that if you're a business owner and executive in a legacy business trying to win in the digital data-driven paradigm, you need to shed that mindset. You need a new way. You need to understand the core driver of value creation in this new paradigm. And so stop boiling the ocean. If you're spreading peanut butter wide across your business, that's not going to bring anyone any value. So these are the two things, stop pray and pray, stop spray and pray, and stop boiling the ocean and layering peanut butter everywhere. It's just a complete waste of money. Save that money. If you don't want to do anything else, you can thank me just for saving that money. But at least now we have seed capital, because either it's money you are wasting or it's money you were planning you would have ended up wasting. So one way or the other, we've first saved money. The next step is leverage. And I think this is something that was implicitly kind of popping up so far in our discussion. But when you think through what are the things you save on, you realize, okay, if these are the things I'm saving on, that means there must be something that makes more sense. That is higher leverage. That is that kind of aligns from first principles, that aligns with my strengths. And that brings me to the next step in my framework, the L in SLASOG, which stands for leverage. And after we go back to thinking, what does the word leverage mean? And it means a lot of things across, different fields. And physics, it's about, it's Archimedes. You set your fulcrum with a little bit of force, you can achieve much, you can lift higher weights. In finance, it's about using debt to boost your return. And so what does that mean in the data-driven value creation paradigm? It's about thinking in terms of return on investment, on invested effort. And effort is a mixed capital of resources, etc., time, focus, whatever, right? So everything that goes into creating value. And to identify broadly in your legacy business where your leverage is, I have a couple of pointers and indicators. And that's the other thing. I cannot give you a cookbook. I cannot give you just a recipe to close your day, where you kind of blindly sort of follow, because that would go against the whole idea of thinking from first principles, right? I can't be telling you we're going to think from first principles, but now do A, B, C, D. So bear with me. What I try to do is give you useful pointers and give you a set of questions that help you apply this framework to your business. But then, of course, the effort of doing that is the onus will remain on you, because if I could templatize or write a recipe for value creation, then there wouldn't be entrepreneurship anymore, because anyone could just copy paste that, and hence there wouldn't be capitalism anymore. I'm constrained by that reality also. But if we think of leverage for a legacy business, what are some key things to look at? So you have certain advantages, right, that others don't. Those advantages are because you're a legacy business, you have existing customers, which means you have a unique customer demand profile. And that is unique to you, and you need to understand that. You need to understand where your power laws are. You need to understand where your Gaussians are. What is uniformly spread, etc. And the more the better and the more you understand that, the more you can tailor something to solve the problem of your customers and then be driven by demand. Because if we go back again to the supply side of value creation here, in the industrial paradigm, you have constant replication cost, constant personalization cost. In the data-driven paradigm, both of them kind of go to zero, which means you're not supply constrained. You can create, with a very small investment, you can create massive amount of value, which means you're not supply constrained, but you're demand dependent. You need to understand the demand. You need to understand how you can delight your customers. That's the risk. The risk is not on the supply side. The constraint is not on the supply side. Right? So that's a super important thing, is figure out your customer, your unique customer demand profile, right? Focus on your unfair non-digital advantage, right? Which is you're still in business because you're definitely doing something in the physical world that is unique to you. Because if you were just competing, let's say, on price against a pure play e-commerce player in retail, you would not be in business anymore. You would have gone out of business over the last couple of years. So clearly there is some physical / non-digital advantage that you have, that you're offering, some value addition that a pure play digital player is not. That leverage that, because that's, again, leverage is also about playing to your strengths. It's if you're playing basketball and you're particularly good on some part of the field or in doing something, then you double down. If you're playing tennis and your front hand is strong, then play your front hand. Don't actively play your backhand just because big tech playbooks are backhand playbooks. You're playing a different game. Play the game you design to win. Then there are legacy physical assets. This is something you see very often, businesses saying, oh no, I have all these physical stores and I have these real estate assets, I have this machinery, I have this whole bunch of stuff that is in the physical world, and it's kind of drawing down capital, it's squeezing my margins. Yeah, of course, if you try to play on a pure play digital player's turf with your physical assets, if you play their game, then it's a liability. But stop trying to play their game. Think about the game you can play. Think about how you can leverage your legacy physical assets to delight your customers, and you can delight them in ways that a pure play digital player cannot. Which brings me to another point, which is counter positioning. Position yourself as the guy who can offer things that they can't. Now you're no longer competing on price. There was I was just speaking with an American podcaster who in the Midwest, a small town, and he kind of said, let's take a small town, sports equipment store in the Midwest. How are they supposed to continue to win in this super competitive, big e-commerce player environment? If you are in a small town, embrace the fact that you're in a small town, right? Understand the exact customer group you have and offer them things. Stop competing on price with with an Amazon, you're going to get butchered. But you can offer things in your small town, experiences, workshops, expertise, value add services around the sports equipment, like nutrition, massage, muscle regeneration, whatever, right? Figure out what your customer demand profile looks like, what brings value to them, and offer exactly those things that a pure play digital player cannot. And so by counter positioning, you're now suddenly playing to your strengths. And if you get this leverage and the whole bunch of things or something, read the book, and it's all about reflecting and applying it to your context, because you can't just copy paste. You can't just copy LeBron and start, playing a basketball. It's not going to work. You need to play on your court the way that kind of works for your context, right? But leverage is super important.
Yeah, no, I love everything you said. I think everyone sounds like a lot of customer centricity, which a lot of companies have started to focus on, which is great. So it's not about the product, it's about the customer, the consumer, which is how you start everything. I know everyone's really anxious to hear about SLASOG part. How would Align, Simplify, Optimize start to fit into this customer centricity model?
Yeah, for sure. If leverage, is the bullseye you've drawn, right? Now clearly what your strengths are, and you play the game you design to win. Now you need to kind of sharpen and point the spear to that bullseye, and that's Align. So now you need to get everyone on board with that. And here's something now. I have something in my book which is very common among software startups. A North Star metric. This is super common. This is highly recommended if you want to create value. And I think this is one of the frameworks, one of the concepts that's super useful even for legacy businesses, because when you're building a physical product, the experience of a physical product is multi-feature and an average experience across time. What I mean by that is, if you choose between car A and car B, There might be things about car A that you like, for example, the music system and I don't know, the haptics of the steering wheel and the engine. The other car has other features, etc. But your experience of the car is an average experience across time. If you think of a digital experience, it's a user journey. It's usually linear. You cannot multitask too much. So you're going through a linear journey. And so the experience, right? So which means an average user experience for a digital user journey is irrelevant, because if the first 3 steps have already annoyed you, you're not going to do the rest. And so alignment is super important, because you need to be very clear around what is your value creation. What is your unit of value creation? How are you measuring it? And how are you getting everyone aligned to that? And a whole bunch of frameworks in the Align chapter to help you do that at a very high level for your entire business, to align your business to the value delivered to your customers. And once you have saved money, leveraged, and aligned, now there's one important step which is super important, which is simplify. And what that means is now you know where you want, like, you know what your strengths are, you know how you want to get there, etc. You need to remove the clutter. And the reason for that is people complain a lot about complexity, about clutter, but where does this come from? In fact, no one actively creates complexity. Complexity is born through problem solving. So you have a business, something breaks, someone's smart, they sit down, they solve it. They've just put a plaster on some problem, and someone's doing that and doing that somewhere else another day, etc. And so over time, you've kind of put bandages all over your business, and that has increased complexity. It's experienced differently in different countries, etc. But if you look at a lot of government services today, when they try to make them digital, you have 4 different portals now where you need to sign up to get one thing done, because they have not thought through the process from scratch. They have a legacy process or organizational structure, and they've just put digital peanut butter on top. And I'm not simplified. They haven't thought from first principles and said, okay, what are we trying to achieve? And how do we design everything towards achieving that? There's actually an interesting book by Hammer and Champy called Re-Engineering the Corporation. I read that because they're speaking about the first time, computers are hitting the business world in the US. And their whole kind of message there is, don't just have your existing process and plug in a PC. Think through from scratch what you're doing. And I think it's something that's relevant today as we move from the digital to the data-driven digital world. And many businesses actually trying to jump directly from the industrial world into this new value creation paradigm. Is you need to rethink from scratch. You need to simplify self-correcting mechanism that will simplify your business, because the self-correcting mechanism is problem solving, and that is the problem. So the problem solving self-correcting mechanism is the problem that increases complexity. So you need to actively take a step back, think things through, to use computer science terminology. You need to refactor, and not refactor just code, but refactor your purpose, refactor your goals, refactor your aims, refactor how you deliver them. So you need to really rethink everything from scratch and simplify and remove everything that's unnecessary. Once you've done that, you've now leveraged and aligned everything, you've simplified. Now you can optimize. What I say is you need to optimize with an empirically valid model of the world. What that means is you need to make sure your assumptions are true. If you want to optimize something mathematically, you need a mathematical model of what's going on, but it needs to be empirically true. So test your assumptions, validate your assumptions, understand which ones are true, which ones are very likely true, which ones are most likely not true, etc. And based on that, you can now optimize whatever you want to achieve. And one big mistake a lot of businesses make is they obsess about forecasting. So I want to forecast revenue, right, across my business. I want to forecast units sold. I want to forecast what a certain customer will do at a certain stage. And so all the time, I see a lot of people just obsessing about forecasting and investing in tons of resources in that, but not thinking about systematically optimizing the decision being taken. Because if I told you it's going to rain tomorrow and you walk out without an umbrella, how does that forecast help you in any way? And even if I'm a perfect weather forecaster and you do not optimize the decision of acting on that forecast, you're still going to, you're still not going to get any value. And in the same way, your customer is not going to get any value. And the other thing about forecasts is people obsess about point forecasts, about knowing exactly when what will happen. The error of your forecast, these are all irrelevant because you need to be able to act under uncertainty. So now if I gave you a broad distribution of outcomes for something, you can start thinking in a leverage way. So what you say is you can try to build what I call an asymmetric bet. So you say, what is more likely, what is less likely out of all the possible scenarios. You focus on the scenarios that are beneficial to you, build down on them, you invest on them. And then the other ones you try to hedge, right? So that's how you would trade in the markets too, right? You don't know which stock in the S&P 500 will go up or down, but if broadly you know the direction and you know broadly which ones are more likely to go up and which ones are more likely to go down, you can build a leveraged bet, an asymmetric bet that irrespective of exactly what turns out, you will most likely make some money. I think that's how you need to think about decisions. And then you can be like, yeah, okay, it sounds very abstract and cool. But the point is you can do all that with data today, right? If you have data, you can systematize it. You couldn't do it 50 years ago because you cannot sit with a notepad and do this, right? There are things that are computationally possible today that weren't possible back then. There are things that can be, that there are ways in which you can optimize decision making end to end today that were not possible before. And so you need to optimize. And once you optimize, you need to shed your scarcity mindset. Right? The scarcity mindset is the industrial age mindset. How much budget do I have? Where do I allocate it? Does not matter. You're not supply constrained anymore because the cost of replication and the cost of personalization have gone to zero. Or are going to zero. What you need to obsess about is demand, your customer, and growth. And once you do these things, honestly, there's nothing holding you back. Right? Logically, numerically, if you have the clarity and the courage to execute on this, you will get impact. And the key element here is data. Data, and that's why the book's called Data Impact, and SLASOG is the framework that helps you create value.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the framework and the order of the framework is important. And I think it's important that folks, I know you just touched the surface of what's in the book, but I really do think it's important for folks to get and read it, because just by listening here, there might be misunderstandings. So some people might think, oh, save, great, I'm going to go cut off my workforce. Wait a minute, hold on. That might not be a wise decision. So I think it's important that for them to read the book to really understand the details to get them to be able to follow the framework and execute it well. I think it's a great way to put it. A lot of folks probably maybe know elements of this, or they've been told pieces of this throughout their career, especially if it's a legacy business. Maybe it's been handed down to them. Oh, this is what we should do. And maybe they're hearing a lot of noise, especially with Gen AI and leveraging machine learning. They might not be sure, or like you said, they want to go and replace all their infrastructure. Well, wait, if that's what you need to do, then great. But it has to make sense for your own business.
Yeah, why do you want to do that, right? And also with AI, I mean, I wrote a book on data impact, and I think I barely used the word AI probably once or twice, or like when I explain why I'm not using the word. And the reason for that is just in my career, I've seen AI mean different things. Like the broadly held consensus definition of AI changed 4 times.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is like, as someone, I forget who said this, but I saw this somewhere on LinkedIn, but someone said AI is whatever machines can't do today. And I think that's what's happening is every few years, there are two things happening. One is more rigorous change in definition, because you say, okay, certain things we thought machines couldn't do, they're able to do now. And so we need to tweak our definition, but also very much commercially driven. Like there's a whole industry out there that's trying to sell you stuff, right? Some of the best commercial talent today is working in SaaS, right? And so they will call AI whatever they want to sell you.
Exactly.
That's not a rigorous definition. Like that does not make any sense to you, right? As a buyer, like you need to stop being a consumer, and you need to is another super important thing is you cannot, like, have not met a single person in the world that has consumed their way to wealth. You cannot consume your way to wealth. You need to think like a value creator. So terminology that gets thrown around, noise, hype, kind of other kind of popular narratives, these are not things that are going to bring you value, right? You need to focus on your customers. You need to focus on what's going to be true for your customers, not today, not just today and tomorrow, but like 10 years. And it's something that Jeff Bezos wrote, I think in his shareholder letters, is something that he's said in multiple contexts, in multiple different ways. But like if you want to succeed with your business, you need to be very clear on what will be true in the next 10 years for your customers. No matter what technology is currently popular, that's not what's going to drive a real innovation.
You have to look at the trends and what's happening in the future, what's going to lead to it. What's really interesting uh, I was reading that a lot of science fiction writers can help you with trending and prediction for the future. Not that robots are going to take over, but if you read between the lines, it was really interesting. One of my favorites, just in finances, is there was a story written in the 1700s, which is the first introduction of credit card. The
Wow.
concept of a credit card first came about in the 1700s by basically a science fiction writer in the 1700s, and then wasn't until the 1950s, 60s, and 70s when credit cards actually, came about. But this whole concept was over 200 years old before it. So I'm not saying we should go look at books from 200 years ago and see what's going to happen in our next 10 years. But you got to see how, like you said, for focusing on the customer, how are people interacting today with all this technology? It doesn't mean go and get that technology. It just means, well, now we're going to create more problems, that are going to arise from it. That then how can you look to solve for that later on? Or how can you adjust your business that in a few years or 10 years down the road, it's going to be a massive need. So you're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and what value are you delivering, right? This is a really nice anecdote I have in the book from Charlie Munger. It was when, Berkshire Hathaway owned textile mills, right? So textile mills, very legacy business, doesn't get more legacy than that. And then someone ran in to the office and I think told Warren Buffett, hey, there are these new machines, they're super efficient, really cutting edge textile machines, we should get them. And he said, hey, let's first check if it's true. And if it is true, we're probably going to exit the textile business, because when a new machine, tooling, whatever you want to call it, comes in, when something external to your business comes in that makes something more efficient on the supply side, there are two winners that come out of this. One is the consumer, because now the barrier to entry has gone down, and so potentially more people can get into the game. So prices might go down or stay low for them. And the other guys are the guys selling the machines. You are the one who's losing out your gross margin. And so you cannot buy, that's what I mean, you cannot consume or buy your way to success. You cannot buy your way into the hearts of your customers. Focus on what value you're bringing. What is the unit of value creation you're providing? And SLASOG your way to your customer's heart. That's how you're going to win. There is no other way to win.
Yeah, I love that. SLASOG your way to your customer's heart. That is the best quote. I hope that's in the book. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything that you would love to share that we haven't talked about today that will leave a lasting impression in folks' minds?
Yeah, I just want to share the human side of things. And, so it was very, like, it's very hard to write a book because you wake up every morning, asking yourself all these kind of doubts, like, why am I even writing something? Why would anyone be bothered, etc. I think something that helped me a lot, and I was able to actually write the core sort of 6 chapters, the core SLASOG chapters of the book in about 6 weeks, is because I was part of a community of useful nonfiction writers. And it's not as if their books had anything to do with mine, but it just helped to know that there were other people going through that same journey, through the same challenges, through the same self-doubts, etc., who were struggling with a similar process. And towards that end, I think also, like, a book is very much an industrial age product. And so, yes, it's kind of a physical product that I can kind of put in your hand. But what I also look and plan to do then is to provide a digital world into which you can step, where you have a community, where you have other business owners, other executives, other investors, other data professionals who are trying to SLASOG their way to success, and all the resources that you need to do it, because it's impossible in a book to add all the nuances that are industry specific, that are business model specific, etc. Right? Because if you think about a book, it's a physical object, meaning once it's printed, I can't change it. So you can't ship it. You cannot change it once you ship it. But the experience of reading a book is like a digital user journey. You're flipping one page after the other. You cannot parallelize. You can't read 6 chapters at the same time, which means that the funny thing is, I really felt the pain of being a legacy business owner while kind of producing this book. If you think of the book as a product, I really felt that pain because it's an industrial product for a customer that's used to the data that's kind of experiencing data-driven digital solutions. So the switching costs are very low. So the book is a physical product competing against a video game, competing against Netflix, competing against a whole bunch of, or just your TikTok or your Instagram, kind of grabbing your attention, having a flow of constant value to you as a reader is super important when crafting this product. So that's why I try to do in the book. But then, like I said, I cannot kind of put every detail and nuance into it, and I cannot personalize it to you just because the book is a physical product. And so go on Ritavan.com. There's a waiting list for the book right now, but in the future, I want to sort of build out a whole bunch of data-driven digital resources for you. And in some ways, I'm basically, as an author, doing the same thing that SLASOG is about for you as a legacy business owner. Is you have a legacy business, so you have a physical product, and you're trying to layer on value for your user that is, digital and data driven, because I think we're living in a hybrid world. We will continue to live in a hybrid world. There's a place for atoms. There's a value in atoms and the value in bits. Both of those matter. And I think thinking that way, playing to your strengths, bringing all of that together is where the value is. And I've not written this book because I wanted to write a book. I've written this book for you. And I really, really wanted to bring you value. And yeah, the other problem is disintermediation between the author and the audience today, because I cannot walk to you and just hand the book to you. You're probably going to buy it on Amazon or buy it on some other platform, and I kind of lose the link to you. And so if you go on www.ritavan.com, myname.com, you can engage with me. I can provide you resources, and we can have a relationship. I think that's something that is possible today, and that I really look forward to.
I love that. And that's www.ritavan.com. Again, ritavan.com. We'll also put the link in the show comments. I love that you're going to be able to have that interaction. So you're right, in today's society with our technology, somebody can read your book and then be able to continue that learning and interaction with you as the author. So there's questions, ability. So I urge everybody to get on that wait list, get there, and get that FaceTime or digital time with Ritavan. And I appreciate you coming on the show. It's learning so much. I love SLASOG is now a verb that we all should be using when we think about our businesses. And you could have it on your desk, just have that little acronym. And what have you been doing each day to achieve those goals you've written down for yourself in SLASOG? And can you check back to it to make sure that you're following it? Again, thank you for being on the show. So insightful. And to everybody else, keep on innovating.